Welcome to Criminal Conversations, where your hosts will take you through some of the most fascinating crime stories in under 20 minutes. If you're looking for a quick and engaging deep dive into the world of true crime, you've come to the right place.
Welcome back, everyone, to Criminal Conversations. We're diving into a case today that's truly stranger than fiction. The story of Rodney Alcala, the dating game killer. This guy, he actually managed to charm his way onto the dating game back in 1978, right in the middle of a terrifying murder spree across several states.
It's almost unbelievable, isn't it? A seemingly charming guy on this lighthearted game show hiding such a dark secret. Really makes you think about how appearances can be deceiving.
Yeah, for sure. But before we even get to that infamous game show moment, let's go back to the beginning.
Okay, sounds good.
His criminal history stretches back to the late 1960s. And honestly, it's a story that's just riddled with missed opportunities and near escapes.
Makes you wonder how many tragedies could have been prevented.
Yeah.
If those warning signs had been taken seriously.
Right, exactly. It's a chilling thought. His first known victim was 8-year-old Tali Shapiro. This was back in 1968. Alcala, he posed as a photographer to lure Tali into his car. As she was walking to school in Los Angeles,
Oh,
a neighbor thankfully saw the abduction and immediately called the police.
thank goodness.
The officers arrived at Alcala's apartment. They found Tali unconscious. She had been brutally beaten.
It's a miracle that she survived.
It is. But as the police were focused on saving her life, Alcala, he managed to escape out the back door and disappeared.
Wow. So this escape, this was just the beginning of a pattern, wasn't it?
It was. That would become all too familiar in Alcala's case. Evasion, manipulation allowed him to stay one step ahead of the law for way too long.
Sadly, Tali's case wasn't an isolated incident either, was it?
No, it wasn't. Just a few months later, Alcala targeted another young woman, 16-year-old Morgan Rowan. She had this terrifying double encounter with him.
Oh, no.
The first time, he trapped her behind a dumpster. Thankfully, she was rescued. But then later that same year, he brutally beat and raped her in his apartment.
Oh, my gosh. Imagine the terror she must have felt.
I know. She was only saved because a friend happened to, break in and interrupt the attack.
Wow. These early attacks really show a predator escalating in violence, don't they? A predator growing bolder with each terrifying encounter.
Yeah, exactly. And what's particularly frustrating is how this system seemed to fail these early victims. After the attack on Tali, Alcala fled to New York City.
He did.
Yeah, assumed a new identity and enrolled in NYU's film school. So he was living this seemingly normal life, while hiding a monstrous secret.
It's almost as if he was leading a double life, one that was completely built on lies and deception.
Exactly. And it worked for a while. He was eventually arrested
Yeah,
and sent to prison for the assault on Tali.
maybe.
Because of concerns about re-traumatizing her, she wasn't allowed to testify. This resulted in a reduced sentence.
So he was allowed back on the streets much sooner than he should have been.
Yeah, much sooner.
This is a classic example of the justice system, failing to protect the vulnerable, and this failure had some devastating consequences, didn't it?
It did. Alcala's release basically paved the way for him to continue his reign of terror, this time on the East Coast.
So while he was in New York, he's been linked to 2 murders that occurred during that time.
Right.
Cornelia Crilly, a young flight attendant. She was found murdered in her Manhattan apartment in 1971. And then Ellen Jane Hover. She disappeared from Manhattan in 1977, and her remains were actually later found on the grounds of a Rockefeller estate.
Wow. What a crazy, eerie story.
It is. It's a very unsettling story. And what's even more unsettling is how these cases remained unsolved for years. Just goes to show Alcala's ability to cover his tracks, to blend into the background.
It wasn't until much later, with advances in forensic technology, that investigators were able to link him to these crimes.
Right.
In Cornelia's case, a fingerprint on an envelope that was found at the crime scene eventually matched Alcala's prints. This provided this chilling piece of evidence that connected him to her death.
Wow.
And then in Ellen's case, her calendar contained the alias that Alcala was using at the time.
So that placed him right in the frame.
Yeah, exactly.
These discoveries, they really highlight the importance of forensic evidence in these cold cases, don't they? To bring those perpetrators to justice, even decades later.
Yeah. But in the meantime, Alcala was still out there, operating under the radar, a ghost moving through society, leaving a trail of tragedy.
This brings us to 1978, the year that Alcala's path crosses with the dating game, this popular TV show that inadvertently gave him this platform, to showcase his manipulative charm, to add a surreal twist to his already chilling story.
It really is a bizarre and disturbing episode in this case, and one that raises a lot of questions about how someone like Alcala could so easily present himself as this harmless bachelor looking for love.
I mean, imagine the women in the audience watching him, completely unaware of the monster lurking beneath the surface.
It's a stark reminder that evil can wear many faces, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones that seem the most charming and unassuming. So let's set the scene. It's 1978. Alcala, using the name Rodney. He appears on the dating game. He presents himself as this successful photographer with a witty personality.
And he's good at it, isn't he? I mean, he manages to charm the bachelorette, Cheryl Bradshaw, with his playful banter and smooth talk.
I know, it's crazy. You have to wonder what was going through her mind as she was interacting with him, completely oblivious to the darkness that he was hiding.
It's chilling thought, for sure.
It is.
And what's even more unbelievable is that he actually won the date. Can you even imagine the shock and the horror when Cheryl later learned who he really was?
I can't. Thankfully, Cheryl, she actually had a bad feeling about Alcala after the brief interaction on the show, and she decided to decline the date.
Oh, wow.
She later told a producer that she got bad vibes from him.
Seems like her intuition really saved her from potentially becoming another victim.
Yeah, it did. That's a powerful example of the importance of trusting your gut instincts, especially in situations that feel off or unsafe. Sadly, not everyone was as fortunate as Cheryl, though. After his close call on the dating game, Alcala returned to California, where his murder spree would continue.
And this time, DNA evidence would eventually link him to 4 murders that occurred during this period. 18-year-old Jill Barkham, 27-year-old Georgia Wickstead, 32-year-old Charlotte Lamb, and 21-year-old Jill Parenteau. Their bodies were all found in various locations across California, each case marked by this chilling brutality that would become Alcala's horrifying signature.
Yeah, it's awful. These murders, they would ultimately lead to Alcala's capture, but not before another young girl. 12-year-old Robin Samso tragically became entangled in his web of terror. Her story and the relentless pursuit of justice that followed would mark a turning point in the case. Summer of 1979. In Huntington Beach, California, it was supposed to be filled with sunshine and, carefree days at the beach. But for 12-year-old Robin Samso, it would become a time of unimaginable terror and the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt her family and the community for decades.
Robin vanished on June 20th. She was riding her bike to ballet class. This really sent, shockwaves through Huntington Beach, turning this familiar seaside town into a place of fear and uncertainty.
Yeah, it was Robin's case that would finally bring Alcala's reign of terror to an end. But not before. A very long and complicated legal battle. That would really test the limits of the justice system and expose its flaws.
Thankfully, Robin's friend Bridget, she had been with her earlier that day, and she was able to provide this crucial piece of information to the police.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she remembered a man approaching them on the beach, asking to take their picture.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
This was big, right? Because Bridget's description of the photographer matched descriptions of Alcala from previous cases.
It did, and that connection, coupled with the fact that Alcala had been spotted in the area, made him the prime suspect.
Right.
And tragically, 12 days after Robin vanished, a fire crew made a horrific discovery in this remote canyon near Sierra Madre.
What did they find?
Her skeletal remains.
Oh, my God.
It was just devastating for Robin's family. A grim confirmation of the community's worst fears.
Alcala was then arrested and charged with Robin's murder, setting in motion this legal battle that would span decades, multiple trials and appeals.
It was a long and agonizing process for Robin's loved ones, wasn't it?
It was. They were forced to relive the trauma of her loss over and over again.
As the wheels of justice slowly turned.
Exactly. Alcala's first trial was in 1980. It resulted in a conviction and a death sentence.
But this verdict wouldn't stick, though, would it?
No, it wouldn't. It was overturned on appeal because the jury had been improperly informed about Alcala's prior criminal history.
Oh, wow. Imagine the frustration, the despair Robin's family must have felt as the man responsible for their daughter's death was given another chance to escape justice.
And that's exactly what happened. Alcala was granted a second trial in 1986. Once again, he was found guilty, sentenced to death.
But
the conviction was overturned due to issues with witness testimony and the admission of certain evidence.
it's hard to believe that someone accused of such horrific crimes could be granted not 1, but 2 retrials.
Yeah.
It really highlights the complexities of the legal system and the importance of ensuring due process, even for those accused of the most heinous acts.
For sure. All the while, as Alcala was navigating the legal system, another chilling aspect of his case started to emerge, adding this whole new layer of horror to his already disturbing story.
After his arrest, police discovered a trove of over 1,000 photographs in a storage locker that he had rented. Many of these pictures featured unidentified women and children, often posed in sexually suggestive or uncomfortable positions.
Oh my gosh, the sheer volume of photographs,
Oh,
coupled with, the nature of the images, led investigators to believe that Alcala may have had far more victims
yeah.
than those he was officially linked to.
Yeah. It's a haunting thought. It raises a lot of questions about the true extent of his crimes.
Authorities actually released some of the photos to the public in a desperate attempt to identify potential victims and bring closure to families who had lost loved ones.
Hoping that someone might recognize the individuals pictured.
Right.
It was a long shot, but it yielded at least one heartbreaking result.
Yeah.
In 2016, one of the photographs from Alcala's collection was positively identified as Christine Thornton, a woman who had disappeared from Wyoming in 1977. And her remains were later found in a remote area of Wyoming, providing a tragic end to a decades-long mystery.
While Alcala admitted to being with Christine, he was never tried for her murder because of his declining health.
Her case, like so many others, really shows the lasting pain and uncertainty that Alcala's crimes inflicted on countless families.
Yeah. As the years went by and the search for answers continued, technology advanced. This offered new tools for investigators to revisit cold cases.
Right.
And in 2003, DNA evidence linked Alcala to 4 more unsolved murders in California, all dating back to the late 1970s.
This breakthrough gave prosecutors the evidence they needed to bring Alcala to trial for a third time. This time, not just for Robin Samso's murder, but for the 4 additional cases as well.
This third trial took place in 2010. It was a media spectacle, largely because of Alcala's decision to represent himself.
Can you imagine that? A man accused of multiple murders, standing in a courtroom trying to act as his own lawyer.
Yeah.
It's a decision that speaks volumes about his arrogance and his desperate need for control.
For sure. It was like a surreal and unsettling scene. Alcala questioning witnesses, presenting evidence, even delivering his own closing arguments, all while facing the possibility of the death penalty.
It was a high-stakes gamble that ultimately backfired, didn't it?
It did.
His attempts to manipulate the system and present himself as this intelligent and articulate individual, they failed to sway the jury.
Yeah, they did.
Despite all the theatrics and legal maneuvering, the evidence against him was overwhelming.
It was. After a lengthy trial, Alcala was found guilty on all 5 counts of murder and sentenced to death for the 3rd time.
This time, there would be no appeals, no technicalities to save him. Justice, though long delayed, had finally prevailed.
It had.
But even with the guilty verdict and the finality of the death sentence, there were still unanswered questions, lingering mysteries that Alcala took with him to his grave when he died in prison in 2021.
Right. The hundreds of unidentified photos in his collection remain a haunting reminder of the possibility that his true victim count may never be known.
It's true. And for the families of those who disappeared during the time Alcala was active, the pain of not knowing, the lack of closure, that must be a very heavy burden to bear.
It must.
Alcala's story is a complex and disturbing one, a tale of charisma and cruelty, of manipulation and murder.
It's a story that forces us to confront the darker aspects of human nature and to acknowledge the fact that evil can often lurk in the most unexpected places.
Alcala's case really is a chilling reminder of, the darkness that can exist beneath a charming facade, but it also raises some important questions about how he was able to operate for so long, evading capture, preying on innocent victims.
You're right. It wasn't just his charisma. That allowed him to slip through the cracks. There were systemic failures at play, societal biases that hindered investigations, and a lack of awareness about the dangers of predators like Alcala, like his early crimes, the assault on Tally Shapiro, and the attacks on Morgan Rowan. Those were clear warning signs.
They were. Yet, because of a combination of factors, Alcala was able to escape any serious consequences.
Exactly. Limitations of forensic technology at the time. A reluctance to put a young child through the trauma of a trial.
It's true.
And these missed opportunity, they had this ripple effect, allowing him to continue his spree of violence. for years.
It's a tragic reminder of how important it is to take reports of assault and violence seriously, isn't it? Especially when it comes to protecting children.
It is. We also have to consider the societal context of the time. The 1970s, while a period of social progress in a lot of ways, it was also a time when women's voices were often dismissed, minimized. There were a few instances where people, often women, reported feeling uneasy about Alcala or witnessing something suspicious, but their concerns weren't fully investigated.
That's a frustrating pattern that we unfortunately still see in some cases today. This idea that women are overreacting or being hysterical, it's a dangerous stereotype, and it can have really devastating consequences.
Yeah.
It's essential that we believe victims, listen to their stories, and take action to protect them.
Right.
Alcala's case also highlights how forensic science has evolved, how advances in DNA technology have revolutionized criminal investigation.
Yeah. It was DNA evidence that ultimately linked him to the 4 additional murders in California, which then led to his third and final conviction.
Exactly. It's a testament to the power of science and its role in bringing justice to victims and their families.
And it really underscores the importance of continually investing in forensic research, right? And development, ensuring that investigators have the tools they need to solve crimes, even cold cases.
Right. Exactly.
And speaking of bringing Alcala's crimes to light, I think it's worth discussing the recent Netflix film, Woman of the Hour. It focuses on his appearance on The Dating Game.
Yeah. The film explores Cheryl Bradshaw's experience, the bachelorette, who very narrowly escaped becoming one of his victims.
Right.
It's a fictionalized account, but I think it does a good job of capturing the unsettling nature of Alcala's charm and the fear and the uncertainty that his crimes instilled in women during that era.
It also raises some questions about the role of media and entertainment in shaping how the public sees criminals and the dangers they pose.
Yeah.
This film has sparked a lot of discussion and debate, which is a good thing.
It is.
It's important that we continue to talk about these issues and to learn from the past and to work towards a future where women are safe and their voices are heard.
It's a powerful reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that even in what seem like harmless situations, danger can be lurking. This is especially relevant in today's world, where online dating and social media have created new ways for predators to connect with potential victims.
Yeah. Alcala's story is one of tragedy and horror. It's really a testament to the depths of human depravity.
It is.
But it's also a story about resilience, about the courage of the survivors who came forward to share their stories, and about the tireless efforts of law enforcement and forensic scientists who worked to bring him to justice.
Exactly.
And as we conclude this deep dive into the dark world of Rodney Alcala, the dating game killer, we want to leave you with this thought. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, if someone makes you uncomfortable, listen to that inner voice. It might just save your life.
It's true. Evil can wear many disguises. So be vigilant, be aware, stay safe out there.
Until next time, keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
Thanks for listening to Criminal Conversations. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to rate and review. It makes a huge difference and really helps us out. All of the sources used for today's episode can be found in the show notes. Join us every Monday and Thursday for a new story and another criminal conversation.